Hey, welcome. So today we're going to dig into a single court document from 1949 that, and I'm not exaggerating, completely changed the world. It's a fascinating story about a question that had never really been asked before, a question that literally gave birth to a whole new kind of global power. And it all boils down to this one simple but really profound problem. See, the United Nations was brand new, right? It was built from the ashes of World War and was immediately thrown into the deep end of the Cold War. It was sending its people on some seriously dangerous missions. But what happens if one of them gets hurt or even killed? Who gets to stand up and demand justice? Well, the agent's home country for sure, but what about the UN itself? Could the organization do it?
The answer, it turns out, was found right here, in this document. This is the cover of the official advisory opinion on what they called Reparation for Injuries Suffered in the Service of the United Nations. The UN basically turned to the highest court on the planet, the International Court of Justice, and asked it to figure out what it was and what it could do.
Okay, so let's get into it. On December 3, 1948, the UN General Assembly officially handed the problem over to the court. And it wasn't just one question, but two. And these questions were designed to get right to the very heart of the UN's identity.
So the first question was absolutely revolutionary. The UN was essentially asking, am I a person? Now, obviously not a human person, but a legal person in the eyes of international law. Can the organization itself, as its own thing, separate from all its member states, bring a claim for damages just like a country could? And the second question shows just how complicated this all was. I mean, think about it. If the answer to question one is yes, what happens next? Suddenly you have two people who might want to make a claim, the UN and the agent's home country. So who gets to go first? Who has priority? How do you keep it from turning into a total legal mess? Now, the court didn't just come up with an answer in a vacuum. It did what courts do. It asked for everybody's input. And that single request set off this absolute flurry of telegrams and formal letters from all over the world. Nations were being asked to weigh in on whether this new organization they'd all created was actually its own thing. And they moved incredibly fast. I mean, just look at this timeline. From the initial request at the beginning of December to the final opinion in mid-April, this entire global legal debate took just over 4 months. That's lightning speed. Clearly, the world needed an answer, and it needed one fast.
And the responses that came in were all over the map. So on the left, you've got a letter from the United Kingdom confirming it's sending in a detailed legal statement. Big players like the UK, the US, France, China, India, they all submitted arguments. But then on the right, you see a letter from Luxembourg basically saying, thanks but no thanks, politely declining to present an argument. The whole world was watching and deciding if they even wanted to be part of this historic moment.
So, after sifting through all the written statements and hearing the oral arguments, the judges were finally ready. And their answer, well, it wasn't just going to be some dry legal opinion. It was about to redefine the very nature of international relations.
You know, the whole case really hinges on this one concept, international personality. For centuries, pretty much only states, countries, were considered subjects of international law. They were the only ones who could make treaties, go to war, or file claims. The big question the court had to decide was whether the UN was now part of that very exclusive club.
And the answer was a huge, resounding yes. When it came to that crucial question, could the UN bring a claim for harm done to its agent, the vote was decisive. 11-4 in favor. The court was affirming that yes, the UN absolutely had the capacity to act.
So how did they justify this? Well, to do it, the court basically created a brand new legal idea. States have what's called diplomatic protection over their citizens, and it's all based on nationality, your passport. But the court said the UN has something different, functional protection. Its right to protect an agent doesn't come from their nationality, but from the function, the job they are performing for the entire world, a totally new way of looking at things.
And let me tell you, this was not just some legal technicality. This ruling meant the United Nations was no longer just a fancy meeting place for countries. It was now an independent actor on the world stage, with its own rights and its own legal voice.
And this single sentence from the opinion, it might just be the most powerful part of the whole thing. The court said the UN has objective international personality. What does that mean? It means its legal status is a fact for the entire world, not just for its own members. It exists as a legal entity for everyone, whether they like it or not. So, what's the bottom line here? Let's recap the big takeaways. First, the UN was now officially a legal person on the world stage. Second, that means it can bring claims against states if they cause damage to the organization or its people.
Third, this right isn't based on a passport, but on the job its agents are doing. And finally, that legal status is objective. It applies to everybody, everywhere.
That decision from way back in 1949 is still shaping our world today, empowering the UN to act in a million different ways. But it also raises some tough questions. So we'll leave you with this one to think about. How has this power, this legal personhood that was created over 70 years ago, both enabled and maybe even complicated the UN's mission in our modern world? Something to chew on. Thanks for tuning in.